Okay, good morning. I am Stas Margaronis, president of the Propeller Club of Northern California. This is the Storms, Flooding, and Sea Level Defense Conference 2020. And this morning, you heard from port officials at Oakland and Los Angeles, the president of the Propeller Club International, and Arvind Acharya, president of the Society of American Military Engineers. We followed with Jeroen Ertz, who discussed resiliency strategies at Shanghai, LA Long Beach, and Rotterdam. And this was followed by the panel from Texas, including Professor William Merrill at Texas A&M University Galveston, Tony Williams at the Texas General Land Office, and Mary Davila Sheridze, I got that right, an associate professor at Texas A&M, who discussed the cost of not going ahead with building the storm surge barrier that is proposed for Texas. We are now with our Louisiana segment of the discussion. I am joined, excuse me, by Sean Duffy, Executive Director, Big River Coalition, Mark Wingate, Deputy District Engineer for Project Management at the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers in New Orleans, Matthew Gresham, Director of External Affairs at the Port of New Orleans, and Dr. Suzanne Van Kooten, meteorologist at the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. I don't know why, Suzanne, but I always get caught between those two A's and I get tongue-tied, but I'm working on my elocution lessons. Okay, my good friend Sean Duffy is going to start off. He is going to give us the overview of what the situation is that Louisiana faces. And Sean, you guys have been battered by hurricanes this year. At one point, we heard Niels Allen say that the Greek alphabet almost ran out of letters because of all of the hurricanes that have been going your way. How are you guys coping?
So, you know, Louisiana is kind of famous for being resilient people. I've heard a lot of discussion this year about living in the cone of uncertainty, Louisiana. We've been in the cone of uncertainty, I think it was 7 times, maybe even up to 8 at one point. The challenges we face, I'm going to start off with a quick video that will help remind everybody where we are and hopefully keep things moving.
Sean, a reminder, when you share your screen, there's at the bottom, you have to click on audio. So, because I know you have audio for your, there's a little button there for everybody to hear it. When you hit share screen.
I did.
Is it coming up? I don't see it.
Not sure. Ty, can you play it?
Are you hearing doing your share screen? You can't come up? There, I can do this. Yeah.
Okay. So.
Take me a second, just a sec. All right, give me a sec. It's coming up.
I'll see you on 2. Why don't you come right around the dredge for 2 whistles?
We have a cutter head dredge, pipeline dredge, that's working Southwest Pass. And these dredges, it's one-way traffic by these dredges. Captain Stephen Mott. I've been a bar pilot for going on 18 years now. Last year we did over 12,000 ships. 5 years ago we were doing about 10,500. Ships are getting bigger, tonnage is up, draft is up, but Southwest Pass is the same channel, same dimensions. It hasn't gotten any bigger, along with the vessels that we're bringing in here. It's definitely a lot more congested than it has been in years past, for sure. Yeah, full maneuvering is how many revolutions? Yeah, nobody has a crystal ball. Nobody knows what this place is going to look like in 20 years. I know what it looked like 20 years ago and what it looks like today, and I don't know what it's going to look like in 20 years from now. The only thing standing between us and the Gulf of Mexico is that little sliver of Rosa cane right there. And so anything that we can do to rebuild these banks, rebuild these two little slivers of marsh that run along Southwest Pass is beneficial, and it's beneficial to the world economy in a major way.
And I'll just start talking. So one of the things Stas and I spoke last year at the International Propeller Club in New Orleans, and we highlighted the beneficial use of dredge material that we've been part of moving forward.
Tell me when you want to go to the next slide.
Yeah, go ahead. 2 slides in. So
Right.
As that screen stays up, that section in the middle, that's 1.25 million square miles of this country, 41% of the lower 48 states, all connected. We connect all those states to international commerce, and we also drain them. So as we see challenges with increased high waters, we have a large sediment coming down, and what we've been working on the last 10 years is beneficial use of dredge material. And Tony, Todd, if we can go to
Next slide.
yeah, and go 2 slides in. Sorry.
Back there.
I don't see it moving.
Is this a slide you want? You want me to go back?
He wants you to go 2 slides down.
Here, sir. Is it this one or?
So I'm only seeing the first screen. I don't know what's.
Oh, you're not seeing the share screen?
No. No,
No.
we're not seeing anything. We're just seeing the first screen.
First screen.
All right, hang on. Let me stop the
Okay.
share. Let me try this again. Apologies for that. Hang on.
Okay, all right, great. So this is Southwest Pass, and we're looking at 2 cutterhead dredges working in Southwest Pass. There's a core hopper dredge wheeler in the middle of the screen. If you look over to the right side, you'll see a bunch of sand. That's areas that had been recently pumped in this photo. Next slide. I'm going to talk on a couple of points that Dr. Van Kooten is also going to hit. So when I talk to Stas, one of the things that I mention a lot is that the Flood Control Act of 1928 hasn't been completed yet. It was never supposed to take 100 years to be completed. It was started after the Great Flood of 1927, and it's been updated 40 times, but there's a bunch of projects. And if you look at this stat, it doesn't show Bonnie Carey open in 2020, which it opened for, I believe, 28 days in 2020. But you look at these periods where it was open about once every decade or less. And what happened was we became complacent. We didn't have great floods on the river. Well, 2019 was a great flood. And we also had a lot of changes with the amount of sediment that's coming down. Next slide, please. One metric that I learned last year was acre feet. So an acre feet is used to show a volume of water in a flood, and it is what you think, a cubic foot of water across 1 acre of land, and it winds up being 320,000 gallons. Great flood of 1927 and 1973, in comparison, over 200,000 acre feet more. If we can go to that next slide. In 2019, and that great, so here you can see representation, and the great flood of 1927 led to the flood of 1928, and then we had more and more rain last year. So sediment recycling is what we call the program. It really started with the Big River Coalition. I talk a lot on waterways, and I say it's a team sport. So going back to 2007, we began working with the Corps of Engineers to look at how to beneficially use more material as we dredged in Southwest Pass. We saw it as a way to help protect the channel. And what's happened is this has become a model. Next slide, please. So, yeah, that's good. So this shows, like, over every year since 2009, when we started, what happened was cutter dredges were added to channel maintenance and for Southwest Pass. Cutterhead dredge directly pumps the material into the marsh surrounding the pass. And I'll never forget, in 2009, that was a test project, pilot project. We didn't know how it was going to go. And right after it happened, pilots started calling me, man, this looks great. We got acreage down here. We need to build some more over here, and we need to go over here. And then in 2020 and 2019, if you look at that record amount, so we had a great flood. We almost restored just over 1,700 acres at 1 year. There's a great deal of dredge work under contract on the Mississippi River right now. I told Stas the other day, I think we'll be at 15,000 acres in 2 to 3 years. You can go to the next slide. And we do call it the largest wetlands restoration project in the world. This shows like 1985. So this is the Delta, Mississippi River Delta. And Southwest Pass is that channel that goes toward your right. South Pass in the middle, and Passalute. They're deltaic passes here. You can see new acreage. I don't have a photo of 2020 yet. But that photo to 2015, we've added 7,000 acres since we started, to that photo. And right now we have Mississippi River Historic Project to deepen the river to 50 feet. That project will add 1,500 acres. There are 2 cutterhead dredges working on it right now. That's expected to be completed by the end of 2021. Next slide, Todd. With a great flood, there were a lot of calls. Last year, we had a lot of transit restrictions, draft restrictions. We needed funding, we needed dredges. And in the middle of the flood, my friend sent me this photo of their farmland in Minnesota. And it was a reminder that that flood wasn't over yet. And the estimates down there, the Corps of Engineers predicted, it was like, okay, there was calls, how do we fix Southwest Pass? What do? We need to maintain the river. We need to continue to keep ships moving. And as we worked on that question, next slide, please. So Big River Coalition, there's a lot of text on this slide. Big River Coalition developed a campaign called Full Funding Floats All Boats. We asked that $200 million be secured every year for the Corps of Engineers to maintain the ship channel. And in the over the last 2 years, the Corps has seen record funding, over $245 million. So well over that 200 million. And we've always talked about the business model. So as more funding comes in, we felt confident that the dredge contractors would start to respond. There are 3 industry hopper dredges in construction in shipyards in the US right now. The Corps dredge pre-solicitation notice was just sent to recapitalize it. There's 3 new large cutterhead dredges that were built, and there are 2 new ones in the shipyards now. So as that funding comes, it starts to free up investments, and we need those investments. There's a lot of projects coming up. Like I said, 65 million cubic yards of material under contract, or that will soon be under contract in the lower river. And that acreage would add about another 5,000 acres. Next slide, please. So I talked quickly about the ship channel deepening. These are the steps that we had to get there. So we had to change a threshold. There was a threshold established in the WRDA bill of 1986 that channels deeper than 45 feet was a 50-50 cost share for channel maintenance. That was a stumbling block. That was one thing that we really had to change. And luckily we were able to do that in the WRDA bill of 2014. The next thing was to update the economics. That was completed in 2018. And then to start deepening. So the deepening started on September 11th with the cutterhead dredge, Captain Frank. Robert M. White is also working. And then a cutterhead, a hopper dredge will come in and complete that project toward the middle of next year. Next slide, please. So I know Dr. Van Kooten is going to really hit a lot of the flooding, but we have looked at more and more research, and it's saying that precipitation is increasing around the world and has been, and we're seeing more frequent storms. Because of that, we can expect more operation of Bonnie Carey. We can expect more challenges maintaining the river, and it's really important to remember it's not all water coming down. A great deal of sediment comes down. Next slide. So this is a breakdown of the numbers from 2019. If you only look at that top number, almost 87 million cubic yards, about 35 million cubic yards more than the average amount of material was dredged last year. It shows you a breakdown of where that material came from and that almost 2,000 acres were restored. So there's great opportunity with the flood, but without the funding and the dredges available, we will continue to have problems. And we see this as a way to help protect Southwest Pass from encroachment from the Gulf. Next slide, please. So this again is Southwest Pass, and you see that little insert. That's a lighthouse, Southwest Pass Lighthouse of 1871. So if you look at that area to the left of it, that's where that lighthouse is. And it's been restored, but it shows that if we continue to pump material, we can continue to maintain that area, or at least we have been so far. Next slide. So this is where I sail off into the sunset. This is a cutterhead dredge working at the hopper dredge disposal area. And as we complete this, I guess we'll hold questions to the end, and sorry for fumbling through the presentation.
Sean, thank you very much. That gave us a very good overview.
Should we share?
Okay, I'm echoing for some reason. Todd? Okay, I'm not echoing now. Our next speaker, Mark Wingate, Deputy District Engineer for Project Management with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. Mark, welcome, and we are, I know you have been very challenged this year by the weather and the hurricanes. How are you faring? Mark, I can't hear you. You need to unmute.
All right, Stas, mic check.
We can hear you.
All right, thank you. Well, I appreciate the question. Is Sean stated, my numbers tell us that we've had 8 storms in the Gulf of Mexico predicted to make landfall. 5 of those have hit Louisiana, and hurricane season's not over yet. So we're faring well. I agree with Mr. Duffy when he said the folks in Louisiana, like everywhere in the nation, they're resilient. But I think I speak for everyone from local to state to federal government. It's been a long year, and well, probably like many of us, we're ready for 2020 to move on. But we're alive, we're healthy, and we're doing well. So Stas, if it's okay, I'm going to go ahead and attempt to share my screen, and I'll go ahead and make the presentation.
Yes, please.
Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen right now?
We can.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, I appreciate that. Okay, so I'm going to be brief on this presentation. I was given 7 minutes, so I'm going to do my best to hold within that. I was asked to speak just real quickly on some of the efforts that we have going on in Louisiana with respect to sea level rise and storm surge. Just to orient everyone on the next screen, just where we're focused, the New Orleans district, we essentially cover half of Louisiana, and you can see that on the screen here. We cover the southern half. So that's the area that I'll be focused in on. So the first program that many of us are familiar with is what we call the Greater New Orleans Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System. Of course, this is the system that the nation invested in following Hurricane Katrina in 2005. This was a $14.5 billion investment, $14.5 billion investment. In the interest of time, really what I'm going to call it is the perimeter. That's the green line with the blue dots that cover, that basically surround the New Orleans area. Again, $14.5 billion. That green line essentially represents our levees and flood walls around the New Orleans and metropolitan area, and the blue dots either represent structures and pumps. I will tell you, this is the greatest storm surge risk reduction that the New Orleans area and surrounding area has ever had. It was designed for a 1% level of risk reduction, but I will tell you it's beyond that. It actually provides risk reduction up to a 500-year still water level, and it's even got resiliency beyond that. I'm going to cover that on the next slide. But there's a couple keys. When we redesigned this particular system post-Katrina, we actually shortened the perimeter, and that's important because it's that perimeter that reduces the risk or protects the people that live within the area. We reduced that by 35%, nearly 70-mile reduction. And we did that by cutting off access points where all those blue dots are. The water no longer can penetrate the perimeter, and we have cut that particular area off. But the one thing I would leave the group with is, even though the nation has made this investment, without further investment in the future, this system is not going to perform as designed. Without future investment, it will not perform as designed. Just want to show you some of the improvements in resiliency. I will draw your attention to the top of the photograph here, where we talk about eye walls before and T walls after. There's no comparison. You can see that in the photograph on the right-hand side, an old flood wall to the right and a new flood wall that helps build this risk reduction system. Again, no comparison, and there's resiliency built in. If water was to ever overtop these walls, there's things like splash pads on the back to prevent scour so that system doesn't become undermined. All of our levees, earthen levees that are shown here at the bottom left, are armored. They're armored with a high-performance matting. Then they're sodded with not just any kind of sod, but certified Bermuda. And that was all run at flume test at Colorado State to ensure that if, in fact, the system is overtopped, it does not breach. So it has significant resiliency to that system. We move to the next slide, please. I want to focus a little bit on the Mississippi River. Why the Mississippi? Well, because the Mississippi flows through the heart of the New Orleans and surrounding area. It flows through the heart of the Greater New Orleans Storm Surge Risk Reduction System. But I want to draw your attention to two numbers on this particular slide. The number 2011 and the number 2073. Where 2011 is shown on this map, this represents the point at which the Mississippi River levees have to protect against the hurricane surge for year 2011. And so the Mississippi River levees were upsized to protect against a reduced risk to hurricane surge for 2011. However, 2073 represents, because of sea level rise, hurricane surge continues to propagate up the Mississippi River. So 2073 represents very similar for where the river levees will have to be upsized by that particular year. Again, future investments are going to be required for this system to perform as designed. We go to the next slide. Wanted to give you kind of a snapshot of where we're looking at future investments in Louisiana to get after flood risk management, storm surge, and of course combating against sea level rise. So this particular map shows many of the locations where the Corps of Engineers is investing in flood risk management. About half of those polygons or blocks represent active construction. The other half represent future investment phase work. Most of the work does focus on levees and walls and pump stations, but as we're starting to see a movement as we get in less densely populated areas, really kind of moving to a non-structural solution, moving away from walls and barriers and really elevating structures and homes and businesses, etc. I will call out to the right in the New Orleans area, the letters LPV and WBV. Those stand for Lake Pontchartrain vicinity and West Bank vicinity. But really what that's doing is that's looking at the potential for future federal investment in the greater New Orleans hurricane system, as well as the Mississippi River levees. One last point I will tell you, all of those studies do have to consider future sea level rise, and we look at different conditions to make the appropriate investment decision. And I'd like to leave us off with one particular slide, and this is where Mr. Duffy was talking a little bit, beneficial use of dredge material. Of course, we have many authorized navigation channels in the New Orleans district, and anytime we can do beneficial use, we want to do that. Of course, that does take funding to do that. But it is another opportunity to try to reduce storm surge through a multiple lines of defense strategy. And certainly we want to employ that here. As Mr. Duffy showed the two photographs that I'm showing as well on the right-hand side, just the before and after. Of course, one way we do this is specifically off the lower Mississippi River, where again, we can try to knock down not only the surge, but the investments in the infrastructure in that particular area, such as the Mississippi River or the Venice area, et cetera. So look, in summary, we know that the sea levels are rising. We know, especially in Louisiana, we have some of the highest rates of subsidence. And we do have uncertainty in that. But regardless, it is occurring. We can and we continue to make investments in southern Louisiana, especially when it comes to flood risk management and navigation, such as the Greater New Orleans Hurricane Storm Damage Risk Reduction System, as well as the MRT and some of the other areas that I showed you. But to me, certainly we can debate all day what the rates of sea level rise are and what the rates of subsidence are, but it really comes down to, will the nation invest in the future? And so time will tell. Time will tell. I will tell you, New Orleans was greatly benefited by the $14.5 billion investment after Katrina, but OMB and this nation and our local and state partners have some tough decisions as we move forward and how we invest. And with that, that concludes my brief, pending any future questions. Thank you for allowing me to speak here this morning.
Thank you very much, Mark. You're making a good point about the investment that is going to be a subject of discussion here. Our next speaker is Matthew Gresham, Director of External Affairs. Matthew, good morning. Matthew, good morning. Got to unmute Matthew. We can't hear you, Matthew. There you go. Now we can hear you.
Great, great, great. Is my presentation available? Is it up?
Matthew, did you want me to share it?
Yes, I guess if you can.
Okay, hang on. There we go. Okay, give me a second.
I appreciate the invitation to talk to you all today. You know, I was asked to kind of talk about how all these affects commerce and the ports in general. Apologize for the technical delay there, but you can go to the next slide if you can. It's the same type of scenario that Sean and Mark both mentioned. I apologize for that, but it's worth reiterating that, you know, every weather pattern that affects most of North America affects commerce in the lower Mississippi River. I like to say every raindrop, every snowflake that even Sean was mentioning eventually comes right through the port of New Orleans, and all of that has an impact on commerce here in the river stages. Next slide. The lower Mississippi River, where we're located, New Orleans is in the heart of the lower Mississippi River, and you know, 5 of the top 15 ports in the nation by tonnage are located in Louisiana, and you know, that's 400,000 jobs for the state, $20 billion in earnings. So it's big business. We move 60% of the nation's grain exports, 20% of the nation's energy. And of course, New Orleans is the big major general cargo hub right in the middle of that. So trade is big business for Louisiana and has a great impact to the world. Just to give you a little background there. Next slide. And that is why the 50-foot channel, I want to thank Sean for all of his efforts and Mark for his efforts with the Corps. This has really been a team effort to get this channel deepening project started. It's going to allow the largest vessels in the industry to transit the lower Mississippi River. And according to the Corps' own numbers, 1 foot of draft equals about $1 million worth of cargo per vessel. So you can tell the competitive edge that we'll have when we get to that 50-foot channel. We're able to load those grain ships deeper, be able to load have the larger container vessels and so on and so forth. And really the project is already spurring increased investment on the Mississippi River in anticipation of that 50-foot channel. Just the Port of New Orleans is working on a second container terminal downriver of its current footprint, so we will be able to take full advantage of that deeper channel. We're understanding, well, I guess the first contracts were awarded for that deepening project back in September. So they'll be able to provide 50 feet of draft from the mouth of the Mississippi River all the way to the Port of Baton Rouge. It's 256 miles of river. And so it's huge for the whole state of Louisiana, the entire Midwest, and really the country. Next slide. When we come to the impacts of those higher river stages, even just the Port of New Orleans, aside from the Corps of Engineers, we're responsible for our ship berths at our terminals, the approaches to the berths at our container facility. And so we are one of only 2 ports in the country that actually has their own dredge department and operates and owns its own dredge to the tune of about $3 million a year just in operation costs for that department. So when we experience those high river events for prolonged periods of time, like we have in the last few years, maintaining those berths becomes more challenging. And due to that, in addition to our own dredge program, we've had to go out and contract additional private dredge companies in order to help us maintain in challenging river environments. Just since 2004, when we opened our Napoleon Avenue container terminal, we've spent about $17.7 million in private dredge contracts just to maintain those berths and approaches on our own. We have had that was included in WORD of 2016, the Donor and Energy Port Program, which provides appropriations for ports to handle projects such as that. We have had some offsets to the tune of $700,000, $800,000, and just lately about right at $900,000 to help offset some of those costs. But it's still challenging, especially in these uncertain economic times that we're in today. Just in 2018, which Sean referred to as the Great Flood, our private dredge contract was $3.78 million for that instance. Next slide. And as Stas said, we've had a very challenging storm system. So we not only have the water coming down the river, but we have the water, as Mr. Wingate mentioned, coming up the river. So just this year, we've had those 8 named storms that have either hit Louisiana or threatened Louisiana. And it's been particularly busy. And each time that the river is threatened by any of these storms, it triggers a long list of preparations. And that means river restrictions, river closures, floodgate closures, which closes rail commerce as well. So it essentially brings commerce to a halt prior to any of those storms hitting. Each of these, it's increased cost for preparations and recovery, even if we don't feel the effects. So just to take those preparations costs the industry millions and millions of dollars. Next slide. And one thing that we learned very quickly, I started actually at the Port of New Orleans 1 month prior to the landfall of Hurricane Katrina. So I got a baptism by fire here. But most ports and most industries overall have very well laid out and well planned a preparation protocol that they follow. When the big one hits, what they find is they may not have the best well thought out recovery plan for these natural disasters. So we learned a valuable lesson then. While we were prepared, we weren't prepared to overcome the challenges that we faced after a landfall such as that. So that's really critical to have those plans in place. What you're seeing on the slide is MARAD ships, Ready Reserve Fleet ships, that really played a vital role in not only the immediate aftermath of the storm, but also in the city's recovery. We had 6 Ready Reserve Fleet ships that were in the harbor that housed everybody from the CEO on down to longshoremen and truck drivers for about 6 months after the storm made landfall. One of the main things you don't think about after something like that in getting back up and running is where you're going to sleep. And so it's manpower, being able to bring that manpower back to restart operations. So since we've done that, MARAD has accepted that as a protocol that it's used in other disasters domestically as well. This was the first it was used in the United States. It has since been used for Superstorm Sandy and a few other smaller storms that had resulted in the need for them. But one of the things that I was talking to Stas about earlier in the week that we found to be most beneficial, and I think has been copied somewhat around the country, is we have what's called the Navigation Restoration Team. And it's, it's over 100 people, and that's representative of everybody in the industry, both ports and Corps, Coast Guard, all of the navigation associations, the pilots, the barge fleeting operators, the flood associations, and so on and so forth. And right when there is a threat that is perceived or predicted or forecast in the Gulf, that triggers a call for all these folks to convene, and we meet regularly. We have regular calls both prior, during, and after a storm event. And that it's not always just a storm event. You could have an oil spill or an elision or anything like that that's in the channel that triggers these meetings. And it's been very beneficial to have everybody on the same page, both in preparation to understand what the conditions are during an event, and to really prioritize different calls going forward in the restoration of navigation in these events. So it's been a huge help for us, and I think it's been copied elsewhere along the Gulf Coast and on the West Coast. But we could go on and on about the how we deal with the storms that we've encountered in the past and this year, and we prepare for the future. But I'll leave it at that and wait for any questions that anybody may have.
Very good. Thank you very much, Matthew. And Dr. Suzanne Van Kooten, you have had a busy weather year. In fact, you seem almost better not to have a busy weather year down there. Where do we go from here?
I wish I knew. I'm a really good forecaster, and my staff's a really good forecasting staff, but oh my gosh, if we had the crystal ball, we'd be lucky, wouldn't we? So I think Todd's going to put my slides up for me to prompt him to go through them. So first of all, thank y'all so very much for the invitation. And as I've heard many of the speakers before talk about it, it truly is a team effort. So it's really nice to see the familiar faces of the 3 panelists here, because it's been so busy, honestly, and with COVID, we haven't been able to see each other face to face and in the same room. So thank you very much, and it's great to see you guys. I'm going to present a historical comparison for what we looked at in 2018-2019 flood event, and then we'll look at going forward also. So the next slide, please. And so this slide here we're looking at, it was really a tale of 3 flood waves. The ones that are with yellow stars indicate above average flows. So you can see we started in February and March with high flows coming out of the Ohio River. Those subsided, but then the Missouri and the Arkansas River decided to get into the game. So we had the May 2019 flood event. Flood peaks were mainly driven by the Missouri River. And then we went into June 2019, and those were driven mainly by a combination between the Missouri River and the Ohio River. And this slide and data is courtesy of the Mississippi Valley Division of Corps of Engineers. So next slide, please. So if that wasn't enough and we weren't having enough fun then, we went into Hurricane Barry. So we had a very high river with Hurricane Barry coming in. And as you can see from the satellite imagery on the left, it was extremely disorganized and additionally very asymmetrical. In other words, it didn't have rain bands on the western side of it, which was we were extremely lucky. So we were briefing out on this, and you can see on the right side, the circle indicates the river where the red lines are the daily maximum stage of the Carrollton gauge, just outside the New Orleans Corps of Engineers office. And you can see that we were at the daily maximum stages that going back all the way to 1935 when we had Barry that was bearing down on us. So it was a very difficult forecast for that. Sean will tell you, his family was asking what happens if we put out this particular forecast number, which we did for the levees, and he said I would leave. So anyway, so thank goodness we did not reach those stages. We were very lucky. Next slide, please. Okay, so we set, of course, new records for number of days above flood stage. And so the yellow are the ones that we set in the 2018-2019 flood. And you can see there that we were basically 9 months of flooding, essentially, for those areas, Red River Landing, Baton Rouge, and then, of course, Cairo, Illinois stayed above, and that was particularly with those 2 flood events that we were talking about earlier. So next slide. So a historical context, there's a paper that's under review. So this isn't for distribution, it's still under review that I'm writing with some co-authors. And this just shows you the difference in the Bonnie Carey spillway cumulative discharge for these historical events. So you can see in 2019 where we ranked with that. Also to remember in 2019, this was historic. This was the first time there were 2 openings of the Bonnie Carey spillway. You can see when we opened it, and the second, of course, was May the 10th through July 27th. Hurricane Barry was in there. We were very worried about an open Bonnie Carey spillway. We'd never have that with a high river and also a tropical storm coming in, potentially a hurricane. So this was the longest combined opening of Bonnie Carey spillway. And we absolutely shattered the record of 1973 when we had 75 days. So next slide, please. Okay, rainfall rankings. So for August through July, we had since 1895, you can see that the Northeast region, Upper Midwest, Ohio Valley, and the Southern region, those were the wettest that we've had since 1895. And the Southeast section, you can see it was the 5th wettest. So all of those drainage areas, with the slight exception of that Upper Missouri area, we were the wettest. We had record rainfall. So needless to say, record and duration flood event. Okay, so next slide, please. So this transition slide, I'm going to go into the trends that we're looking at in magnitude of heavy rainfall, and also the events in the Mississippi rainfall watershed. So next slide, please. So our rainfall anomalies from 1895 to 2020, we looked at those in this paper that's up for review. Those rainfall anomalies that we're looking at for the 4 major basins of the Mississippi River watershed. And you can see here from basically from 1970 on, the royal blue is the top decile and the top tercile is the lighter blue, just how frequent we are getting for those precipitation above normal precipitation anomalies in those 4 basins. So Arkansas, white red, Ohio, and lower Mississippi, based on conditions since 1896. So next slide, please. So in looking at basically the heaviest of rainfall events for each region, we are also seeing the percent of change in precipitation amount that these produce in very heavy precipitation events. So these trends that are shown here, they are larger than natural variation. So we would see us, just go, oh, it's just our natural variation in our meteorological patterns up from the globe. And so you can see there of what we are looking at for the Mississippi watershed. especially coming out of the upper portions of the Mississippi, and then of course the Cumberland and Ohio. So those precipitation amounts, they have been larger using events from 1958 to 2012. So next slide, please. So how are we looking about this for seasons? And so what we're seeing from the National Climate Assessment is that the seasonality does seem to be changing and will possibly continue to change. So in 2018, 2019, we had a big setup with an October event and very high flows in December, leading into the extended flood event that we had through basically August of 2019. So you can see here that in the fall, and that's in the lower right corner, in the fall, you can see that we are going to be wetter according to National Climate Assessment in the lower portions of the Mississippi River watershed, including the Tennessee. You can also see then in spring, we're kind of neutral, but in all of these, we are looking at an observed change in inches in the amount of rainfall, but particularly how the seasonality is going to be changing. So next slide, please. So we'll look at the trends in the frequency of heavy rainfall and again, the events in the Mississippi River watershed, excuse me. So what we're looking at here in percent change by decade is by the regions that are indicated of the graphs to the arrows that they point to those areas. And what you will see in all of those areas is the frequency of excessive rainfall events. Those have increased in each of the regions within the Mississippi River watershed. So you can look there and basically the Great Plains South, which is basically the Red River Basin and Arkansas, that area there, you can see the percent of change of the excessive rainfall events is very marked. Additionally, up for the Midwest, you can see there from the 80s into current, you know, we have basically, you know, around a 40% change in the frequency of an increase of excessive rainfall events. So next slide, please. So what that for a decadal percent change in our 2-day rainfall events, so multi-day excessive rainfall, the relative number of extreme events. It's an unfortunate trend. So you can see starting basically in, you know, 1965 on, you can see the percent of these excessive rainfall events that we have experienced that are going to be looking at in the Mississippi River watershed and across our nation. So this is not good news, especially as Mark Wingate alluded to with our sea level rise as well. The seasonality is changing. It appears that our frequency of extreme events are changing, and it also appears that the amount of precipitation that those excessive rainfall events will deliver is increasing. So that's an unfortunate situation that we have. Additionally, it appears to just the variability, high flow to low flow. Additionally, I didn't go into this because of time, but we are also looking at the variability of extremes. Also is something that we need to be considering as we go forward with our planning, especially as it affects our navigation interests. So with that, I will close and I will wait for questions with my panelists. So thank you very much.
Suzanne, thank you very much. We are open for questions, and I want to pose something here, and I'm not sure who to ask it of, but Mark Wingate challenged us to say, well, who is going to start making this investment? And the question that I have, and the guys who go to Washington, I know you're one of them, Mr. Duffy. Are we seeing any change in attitude? I mean, with all of this information that we have gotten here, it's pretty compelling that things are going from a pretty bad into a pretty bad place. What do we need to do to get Congress to pay attention? Sean Duffy.
So, I mean, we can never waste a good emergency. So we've got a lot of emergencies going on. And, you know, the Big River Coalition and our members look to be in Washington. You know, of course, you throw in the complications of COVID, but we've seen investments and we've seen benefits. The core budget has gone up. We need that. I use a term that I've seen the Mississippi River Commission use, and it talks about a multi-generation commitment to the Mississippi River. That includes things like completing the Flood Control Act of 1928. It includes increasing funding to maintain the river, knowing that we're going to have to operate Bonnie Carey Spillway more often. Some of the project features for the Flood Control Act of 1928 are bring levees to grade. You know, a great idea. Let's repair these levees to take some backwater storage so it takes some pressure off and moves some water off of the river system at the Yazoo pumps that you know, the state of Mississippi was pushing for. And there's a lot of challenges with maintaining this river system. We have a great deal of investment, but if we fall short, the amount of money we've invested is a failure, leads to failure. We need to continue to push it. Right now, I mean, so we always have to look at positives. So in 2020, positives are the Mississippi River Deep project started. We have new dredges being built. We've looking at a record over 6 billion bushels of grain are getting ready to be exported out of the river, a amount ever shipped out. And contrary to popular belief, a lot of that is indeed going to China. So as we talk about things like feed the world, we make the connection to the Mississippi River. We feed the world out of the Mississippi River. Over 350 million acres of agricultural land are connected to the Mississippi River that represents more miles of navigable waterways than the rest of the world combined. If we can't see the Mississippi River as a project that this nation has to support and has to recover, we lived off of investments made from the late 30s after the Great Depression until the early 70s. We have locks and dams that are over 100 years old with 50 years life. We have to start to invest. I know you liked it the other day when we were talking off the record, Stas, and I talked about how we have highways that have Alzheimer's and channels that need angioplasties, and it's the truth. We really do. We suffer from old age on our infrastructure, and it's time to repair it and try to recover it.
Thank you. That's very, very well put, and I appreciate that. Suzanne Van Kooten, what do you need? What does NOAA need in order to be able to meet some of the challenges that it is facing?
Well, we have a weather enterprise and a water enterprise. In water enterprise, we have modeling and everything. We've got the National Water Center. But I will also say kudos and great appreciation to our partners at the Corps of Engineers. We received channel cross sections from them, and also their river modeling expertise works with our river modelers. So as Sean sometimes says, we are truly a team, along with Tennessee Valley Authority, of course. So what do we need? Gosh, I really can't answer that question. That's a very large strategic question. I know the Floods Act is one that potentially is being put forward by Representative Wicker of Mississippi. So I know there's some wording in there, but I really I don't have an answer for you. So I'm sorry, I can't answer it. I know that we're trying very hard here, and then we go through our channels, literally our channels, to get what we need from the Weather Service.
Thank you very much. Now, among our attendees, does anybody have any questions? Todd, are you seeing anything that I'm not seeing?
No, I don't think so. We're a little over time next probably.
Okay, guys, I want to thank you all very much. You are on the cutting edge here. What's going on in Louisiana has obviously a large footprint, as your demonstrations have indicated. And we really need a sea change attitude towards infrastructure. And Sean, I think you're absolutely right about the Alzheimer's. I think that's everywhere. And I want to thank you all very much. Matthew, thank you very much for your overview of the Port of New Orleans. Mark, for your very cogent and concise remarks. Suzanne, as always, it's a pleasure to have you. And Mr. Duffy, well, you're the oracle of the Mississippi. So, you know, oracle, us Greeks, you know, we go back into ancient history. Not that you're ancient history, Sean.
All good. Well, thank you, Stas. I'm sorry for the technical delays, and I really appreciate my panelists. We are a team, and we work together a great deal. Appreciate all your input and you taking the time. Thank you, Stas.
Okay, guys, thank you very much. Our next speakers are from the Mississippi River states, and do we have Colin Wellenkamp here? I see that we have Mayor Broom's Mayor Broom is here. So
Yeah, I'm here, Stas.
Okay, very good. Colin, are you here?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I can't see, but okay. Colin Wellenkamp is the executive director of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative, and his association represents cities and townships up and down the Mississippi River. We are very fortunate to have Mayor Sharon Weston Broom with us. Mayor Broom, good morning from California. I know it's not morning where you are, but thank you for being with us. And we look forward to hearing you in just a second. Colin, can you give us a little bit of an overview of how you guys have been faring during this hurricane season?
Yeah, well, I want to thank you, Stas, and your organization for inviting the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative to be a presenter today. I am the B team. Our A team is our illustrious and just a fantastic leader, Mayor Sharon Weston Broom of Baton Rouge. She is one of our co-chairs. She's directly partnered with the mayor of Bettendorf, Iowa. Both of them lead our group of 100 United States mayors along the entire length of the Mississippi River in all 10 states, from Bemidji, Minnesota to New Orleans. And it has been an eventful 10-year for both of them. And they are assisted by 10 other mayors, one from each of the 10 states touching the river that comprises our executive committee. Unparalleled, unprecedented hurricane season in recorded history, right off the heels of a record-breaking 9-month flood in 2019, followed by a derecho, some spring tornadoes, and of course, all under a pandemic. So I'm just waiting for the volcano with some brimstone to check off the list. And, but I have to say, through all of it, we've had fantastic leaders, and our mayors have to handle this at all levels. They've got to handle it at the grocery store. They've got to handle it at the gas station, city hall, and everywhere else they go. And they got to do it at all hours of the night. Being mayor is a 24/7 job, 365, and it's the hardest job in America. And because you are with the people all the time. And that's what being a mayor is all about. And we represent mayors. We help mayors in our 100 Mayor Association. So the corridor has not been uneventful over the last 20 months. The longest and largest flood in U.S. history. We clocked 270 consecutive days of flooding in 2019 for some of our Louisiana cities and some of our cities in the middle reaches of the Mississippi. Just unprecedented, almost year-long event that we went through. But you asked earlier, Stas, are we making progress? And we absolutely are. From a mayoral point of view, the mayors have realized some tremendous successes. in the battle to make our river system more sustainable and resilient. One of them has been the advent of the BRIC program. The Building Resilience in Communities program under FEMA just hit the street this year. It's a $600 million grant program. That's about 3 times the size of its predecessor, the Pre-Disaster Mitigation Grant Program. And that was a hard-won fight out of the Disaster Reform Act of 2018. So we have been successful with Congress in moving the nation's balance sheet away from recovery over to resilience. Recovery is the most expensive, least return of the balance sheet from disasters. Resilience, mitigation, and adaptation, you get the most bang for your buck, up to $12 for every dollar invested back to the taxpayer for resilience and mitigation. So you can't beat that investment. Another big success is our mayors deployed along the Mississippi River the first environmental impact bonds ever done along the Mississippi River. We're doing it in New Orleans and we're doing it in Memphis just to start and expanding from there. That takes ecological improvements that bring greater value to a city and city services, and we monetize them and sell that on the open bond market at municipal bond value. That is real money for value, using market forces to translate into sustainability and resilience work and projects on the ground that make our infrastructure more protected and more reliable. And we're deploying 2 of those right now. We're going to be deploying more of them later. And then finally, our mayors were successful in passing in the House of Representatives in July the nation's first Resilience Revolving Loan Fund. This is a first for the country. This uses a revolving loan fund model. It's inside FEMA. And what it does is it allows FEMA to provide capitalization grants to states to set up revolving loan funds for resilience projects. Everything from wildfires to chemical spills to drought, and of course, floods and major storm events are all captured as recognizable costs under that RRF, the Resilience Revolving Loan Fund. We're hoping that that will pass in the Senate during the lame duck session pending. So we've just had some great successes in moving the needle away from where it's most expensive and least productive to where we can get some things done. What needs to be done is we need a comprehensive infrastructure package, and we hope that that is going to actually happen sometime soon. It may need to happen in pieces. It may not be this huge panacea of a bill. It might happen in little slivers, but we'll take it. And we're looking to the new Congress as our best chance yet to make some piece of that happen. The Mississippi River absolutely has to have a huge jurisdiction in that effort. Betty McCollum of St. Paul, Minnesota, who's a co-chair of the Mississippi River Caucus in the House, she is putting forward a Mississippi River program that is designed to do that. We are working directly with her. Mayor Broome is working with Mayor Carter of St. Paul and other Minnesota mayors in her district to make that happen. So there's a lot of good things. I'm going to hand it off to our leader, Mayor Weston Broome, who can really show you what this all looks like on the ground. And she's personally vested. Not only is she an inspiring leader for us and to me, but she has really felt the impacts of what not investing in disaster mitigation means. She lost her home in 2016 to that 1,000-year event that flooded her city. And she was out of her home for a year. And so she has a very personal connection to the impacts that we've all been facing. We're now at $210 billion in actual losses along the Mississippi River corridor since 2005 from disasters. And this has to translate into real projects on the ground in our cities, and that is exactly what Mayor Broome is doing. So Stas, I will hand it off to Mayor Broome, co-chair of the Mississippi River Cities and Towns Initiative.
Thank you so much, Colin, for the introduction. And I just want to say good afternoon to everyone. I know in some areas it's still morning. And for those of you all who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting with, as Colin shared with you, I'm Sharon Weston Broom, the Mayor President of Baton Rouge, Louisiana. And I'm really excited to join all of you all on the first day of the Storm, Flooding, and Sea Level Defense 2020 virtual conference to discuss Baton Rouge's flood recovery plans and challenges that our city faces after a water event. I'm going to start with a short background on Baton Rouge and our flood protection infrastructure, the risks we continue to face, and our all hazards recovery plan for disasters. The city of Baton Rouge sits on the east bank of the Mississippi River, approximately 230 miles up from the river, upriver rather, from the Delta and the entry to the Gulf of Mexico. There are dozens of communities along this 230-mile stretch, and we all share one common characteristic. Our cities and towns are protected from the Mississippi River by a comprehensive levee structure. The levee system begins at the bluffs in North Baton Rouge and extends the entire length of East Baton Rouge Parish. The city of Baton Rouge maintains the 2 miles of levee along the Mississippi River that protects one of our largest private sector critical infrastructure sites, downtown Baton Rouge, and highly populated subdivisions in South Baton Rouge. This stretch of levee also protects our flagship higher education institution, Louisiana State University. To maintain this levee, the city of Baton Rouge works very closely with the state Pontchartrain Levee District and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. These partnerships extend to monitoring the interior rivers that flow into the Mississippi River. So now that I have given you a short background on Baton Rouge and talked a little bit about our flood infrastructure, or flood protection infrastructure, I would say, I want to talk a little bit about the very real risk associated with being located along the largest river system in North America. Baton Rouge residents are no strangers to disasters. In recent years, hurricanes, floods, and chemical disasters have impacted East Baton Rouge Parish, resulting in billions of dollars in damages to homes and communities. Unfortunately, it has also contributed to the loss of life. That being said, flooding from water-related disasters presents our largest natural risk. In 2016, as you heard from Colin, we suffered one of the worst floods in Baton Rouge history, commonly known as the Great Flood of 2016. As Colin also shared with you, I have firsthand experience and knowledge about the Great Flood because my home was flooded during this Great Flood. And it was not great for many residents, I will tell you that. Like many of my constituents, it took me over a year before I returned to my renovated and restored home. And so we have to be resilient. You know, the dictionary defines, and I believe Baton Rouge is the epitome of resiliency. Resiliency, as the dictionary defines it, as the capacity to recover quickly from difficulties, a toughness. And as I said, here in Baton Rouge, we are not defined by our losses, but rather by our strength and determination to quickly recover and build back stronger than before. We know Baton Rouge is resilient. Our community has shown this time and time again. And in this resilience, we have worked to prepare our community and its residents for major disasters. Not only have we built upon our preparations, but Baton Rouge is poised to adapt to ever-changing conditions. Following the Great Flood of 2016, I asked my staff and tasked them with determining how East Baton Rouge Parish can be better prepared for large flooding events by documenting the needs and gaps following the 2016 flood, and then to use the research to assist in developing an all hazards recovery framework that works for East Baton Rouge Parish. My vision for recovery planning at that time, as well as today, is to integrate national standards into local community resiliency by following the guidelines set forth by the Federal Emergency Management Agency's FEMA National Disaster Recovery Framework into our local planning efforts. We also identified local subject matter experts and community stakeholders to create a local recovery plan that incorporated all 4 East Baton Rouge Parish municipalities, as well as the unincorporated areas of the parish, into the All Hazards Recovery Plan. The All Hazards Recovery Plan continues to be the foundation of all of our recovery planning efforts. Our recovery planning efforts after flood events, and as well as other natural disasters. And so these comprehensive plans are accomplished through 6 recovery support foundation subcommittees. These subcommittees are Community Planning and Capacity Building Subcommittee, the Economic Development Subcommittee, the Health and Social Services Subcommittee, and subcommittees for housing, infrastructure, and natural and cultural resources. The 6 RSFs have each developed working committees represented by organizational leaders and stakeholders in their respective discipline areas. Each RSF committee met and identified best practices, analyzed planning gaps, and developed strategies, documenting processes to support and enhance East Baton Rouge Parish recovery from all hazards. Following those gatherings, we held public outreach meetings to engage questions, feedback, and ideas that contributed to the development and operational implementation of the plan. All residents of East Baton Rouge Parish share one common mission: to maintain the health, safety, and well-being of East Baton Rouge Parish. Public outreach meetings are a critical component to our planning process because they ensure that we capture the thoughts and feelings of our entire community. The public meetings greatly assisted how we restore, redevelop, and revitalize resilience for our parish. For instance, given the challenges of this year in particular, the RSF subcommittees have met to provide input on the issues facing social distancing. And during the recent parade of hurricanes that made landfall in Louisiana, each RSF subcommittee remained on standby to mobilize their collective stakeholders to implement the plan in the 6 key areas that I mentioned earlier. One of the greatest advantages of the All Hazards Plan has been to create in our parish a new level of speed and organization. This allows us to transition from response operations into recovery operations effectively and efficiently and quite seamlessly. Having pre-identified recovery support roles is just as important as our emergency support functions while we are responding. While our preparation and planning is critical to our recovery and response, a recovery plan itself is not the full solution to any disaster. Having stakeholders committed to the planning process who share their experiences and ideas to make their community more resilient is what makes the whole process work. Looking forward, I feel that we are better prepared to navigate short-term, intermediate, and long-term flood recovery in East Baton Rouge Parish if and when the need arises. But we can't be complacent because we know from the past, the task of recovering from a major disaster will remain challenging. The Great Flood of 2016 created housing issues, debris and blight issues, behavioral health issues, and numerous other challenges that we continue to face in long-term recovery. But through our resilient nature and our collaborative All Hazards Recovery Plan, I am optimistic about our ability to find ways to better serve the citizens we each represent and address flood needs collectively. I will tell you that one of the leaders in our All Hazards Recovery Plan is the director of the Mayor's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Preparedness, Clay Reeves. And I know Clay is participating in the conference today. I want to thank him for his leadership as well. And thank you for the opportunity to speak with you.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me ask you a question. You're dealing with a problem that is a national problem, and you have a limited amount of resources, a limited amount of budget, and from your report, you had to allocate a lot of resources to address the 2016 situation, especially as it impacted East Baton Rouge. How do you find a long-term solution that provides you with better protection so you don't have to keep fighting these fires like this?
Well, I will tell you, that's an excellent question. Right now, we have worked with our federal partners, our state partners, and to mitigate and manage water here in our areas. We started after the 2016 flood looking at all different avenues. One avenue was that we implemented a stormwater master plan, which will give us data and research in terms of our drainage system. It's the first that's ever been done in the history of Baton Rouge. Secondly, through our work with the Corps of Engineers and our federal and local, federal and state partners, we are working on specific issues such as the 5 tributary projects, those tributaries that impact water retention here in our area. And those projects will be, we believe, will be transformative. So we have to be very assertive, if you will, about partnerships in order to address these disasters. As you know, local budgets, municipal budgets were not designed for the type of natural disasters that we have time and time again. But from those lessons of 2016, we continue to be very assertive in everything surrounding water management.
So the water retention issue, something that Colin has discussed with me in the past, this is a big deal because otherwise you have levees and walls bouncing the water around until somebody without the protection gets whacked, right?
Correct.
So are you seeing any interest in moving along this water retention issue? I know that Colin's spoken about a couple of projects that are going on, but this seems to me like a longer term solution that we all need to be paying attention to.
I wholeheartedly agree. You know, several years ago, I had the opportunity to go to the Netherlands. And as we all know, they are some of the leaders in water management. And certainly water retention initiatives are an integral part of the fabric of their water management. So I agree, it has to be part of our long-term goals. And I see it as a very integral part of our ability to manage water here in our community and in other areas.
And Mayor Brown has delivered that message, Stas, upriver.
Okay.
All the way to Minnesota. So a key operating driver that is within our association is mayors now want to look to and are looking to do what they can to absorb risk on site instead of shunting that risk downriver to another community in a larger form, multiple degrees more dangerous. They want to retain, especially if we can retain it naturally in their own systems as much as practical, without endangering themselves and all the cities around them.
Let me ask either of you can answer this question. Are we getting any kind of visibility with the U.S. Council of Mayors on these issues that you raised, such as water retention, resiliency, flood protection, and the need for more storm water management?
I would say yes, because organizations like the U.S. Conference of Mayors, the National League of Cities, et cetera, they have to be concerned about what concerns mayors and the prevalent issues that mayors are facing. And while we, as a cohort of mayors along the Mississippi River, certainly have that common denominator, you know, climate change, natural disasters are not only happening for those of us on the Mississippi River corridor, but they're happening all over. So these type of issues certainly are on the radar of organizations that serve mayors.
Okay, thank you. Colin, just as a aside, if you could send me some of the information you mentioned about the bonding issues that you described, that would be good background. As you know, I also write for the American Journal of Transportation, and the Mississippi River has a lot of transportation going up and down it, and I think that maybe we could be looking at doing something about some of the challenges that you all are facing. So if you could.
Yeah. Happy to, Stas, and the mayors aren't even stopping with the bond market. Mayor Broome and Mayor Gallagher also are entertaining we're about to launch a pilot with Munich Reinsurance International and the MITRE Group to develop a parametric facility for the Mississippi River corridor. This would be an additional layer of insurance, much like the Caribbean and the coral reef enjoy as parametric facilities to bring more resources and recovery capacity to our cities. And this would be a facility that would actually not be subsidized by our cities, because, as Mayor Broome said, our city's revenues are having a hard time now with the pandemic and coming off of a record flood.
Right.
So this would be actually developed through a third-party contributor construct. We're happy to apprise you of all those efforts.
Okay, I appreciate that very much. Mayor Broome, you're on the front line on this, and I know it is a tough job. And unfortunately, it's not going to get any easier, as we all know. And I want to thank you very much for giving us a very frontline report about the tough issues that you're dealing with. Colin, thank you very much for your participation. Anything that you think would be relevant for us to have, Mayor Broome, Casey's got my email address, and please forward that to me. We can always use that background, and we want to see, you know, the Mississippi is a lifeline for the United States and everybody along it, and we wish you the best in your efforts.
Thank you so much, and thank you for allowing me the opportunity to share today.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, Colin. Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you, Stas.
Okay.
Appreciate it.
Okay, so we are down to our last but not least speaker, who is Peter Dreyfus, who is the co-founder of Watermaster North America. I have talked, and we have talked about the challenge of dredging in the United States, and I sent out to some of you a report from Tulane University indicating that U.S. costs for dredging are much higher than they are in Europe. Watermaster is a Finnish company that is now in the process of building single operator dredgers in the United States under the direction of Peter Dreyfus and his brother Jonathan. They gave us a very interesting report at the Propeller Club about 6 weeks ago, and I was so interested in how this project is going, because one of the criticisms is that we can't have foreign investment and foreign technology because of the Jones Act. And Peter and Watermaster are a role model of how a new strategy for allowing foreign investment to come into the Jones Act trade is possible. So now that I've shown you to be the genius that I know that you are, Peter, I hope you won't prove me wrong.
Thank you, Stas. Well, we've heard some very interesting case studies this morning from Danny Wan at the Oakland Airport about his potential flooding issues. Also, Tony Williams talking about Galveston and those berms on the beach there. We believe we have a part of the solution to some of these projects. We are a licensed manufacturer, and we are an American company building this vessel in Michigan now. My name is Peter Dreyfus, and with my brother Jonathan, we are the co-founders of Watermaster North America, and dedicated to improving waterways to supply clean water in the US and Canada, and also these issues of surge and floods and the ocean rise. It's undeniable, and maybe the people in DC will eventually believe it. We are manufacturing and distributing a unique industrial machine in the US for the first time. This has been around Europe for a long time, and it's currently distributed in 70 countries. In 2 to 3 weeks from now, we will complete our first vessel at Moran Iron Works in Onaway, Michigan. The Watermaster AMD 5000 is a 40-foot long multi-purpose dredger designed in the late 80s in Finland. And you may ask, why Finland? Because there was no suitable equipment available to maintain the almost 200,000 lakes in Finland. So it was designed in 86, 87. It's on its 5th generation. And what we're doing is building the hull, the pontoons, and assembling some parts made in Finland and making this a Jones Act compliant vessel. It's currently in use in over 70 countries. This machine is amphibious in that it can be trailered to a riverbank, raise itself on hydraulic spuds, and then walk into the water. It's a sight to see, and it's on our YouTube at our website.
Peter, did you want me to share your screen?
If we could start the slideshow, Todd, that'd be
great.
All
right, we'll do.
Thank you. So this feature of being trailered by one operator, and then there's the machine, and the next slide shows the transportation, and well, it'll be a while, I guess. But one man can drive up, raise the machine, and then walk it into the water. It has a propeller, and because of all these efficiencies of scale, you don't need a crane, a barge, a tugboat, et cetera, et cetera. And it also has a variety of attachments, much like a Swiss Army knife. So it can perform a variety of waterside functions. Equipped with a propeller, this navigable craft has not been available in the US due to the Jones Act, which coincidentally celebrates its 100th birthday this year. The Jones Act has helped maintain the dozens of small and large ship manufacturing yards around the country, and for that we are grateful. The Watermaster was born out of necessity. It's well accepted in Europe, in India, in Russia, in Africa, etc. And it does things that standard machines do not do. Excavators, for instance, are land-based, and conventional dredgers that, for instance, do the Port of Oakland only operate in deeper waters. No machine existed up to this one to properly handle the work of shallow waters, which is defined as from 0 to 20 feet deep. This was developed in 1986. A new innovation was introduced in Louisiana, Finland, an amphibious multi-purpose watermaster dredger, which can safely, efficiently, and in an environmentally friendly way handle work in the shallow water areas. Todd, if we could just hit a few of those slides. That's what it looks like with the suction dredger. This is a patented high velocity pumping system that takes 20 to 30% solids from the grinding of the mud all the way through that long arm in a 10-inch pipe, and can pump up to a mile away without a booster pump. With boosters, you can go 2, 3, 4 miles. With dosing boxes, you can fill up geotubes and build riprap or build giant bags of mud that will turn solid. And we're exploring that for the Great Lakes. Maybe it's a potential solution for Oakland Airport. So this, I'm sorry?
Want to go next slide?
Yeah, sure. These are some of the attachments. The clamshell in the right-hand side, a regular 3/4 yard bucket after that. Then there's an 8-foot rake for hyacinths or plastic bottles in India, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah, let's go to the next slide. And there is our friend Watermaster lifting itself hydraulically off the trailer. The trailer leaves, and then let's see if the next slide has the glory shot. No, those are the blue dots. But anyway, there it is working in the water. Americans are not so keen on spraying like this, but it's well accepted in many other countries. Yeah, next slide, please. It's also a standard excavator where it will stabilize itself on the bottom of a lake or a river and then just scoop mud into a companion barge. Yeah, next slide, please. And there is sort of one of its most famous applications, cleaning up vegetation, which chokes many rivers and streams and turn them back into beautiful waterways.
Next.
Also useful with different attachments. This is the Movax, which will actually build a marina or put piles on a bank. It'll also do sheet steel piling if you have different applications. Yeah, next. And that's the whole machine all spread out with the spuds in the back anchoring it, and then the front spuds stabilizing in the front. One man can operate this, or one woman, and 2 is obviously easier, but it's a very efficient machine which can do a lot of different applications with a minimum of manpower. Next, please. Marinas and clearing out silt are also an application I've been slowly arranging a database for around the 40 marinas in Northern California. Half of them seem to have serious siltation issues, and we'll be helping them soon. Next one, please. And that's our dream. I look at this every night before I go to sleep. So our overall purpose is fourfold. keep waterways in good conditions, prevent floods with barriers such as geotubes, etc., clean urban canals like we just saw, and then remove invasive vegetation. With this variety of attachment tools, the Watermaster AMD 5000 can function in many ways as a marina builder, canal clearance, beach restorer, icebreaker, and renewing tailing ponds for mining operations. This is our partner, Moran Iron Works in Onaway, Michigan, and they build ferries and workboats and all kinds of special application vessels. They've been around for 40, 45 years. And then the final slide, I think, with a little bit of info. Our headquarters are in Ann Arbor, Michigan. I live in Oakland, and I'm marketing the West and the West Coast. I live 2 blocks from the estuary. And we invite your inquiries, and thank you for your time. If you have time, please check out our website, watermasterna.com, and you'll see a beautiful action movie of this thing walking into the water. Thank you very much for your time.
Peter, thank you very much. The presentation was cogent and to the point. My one question that I think has been an issue for a lot of people, challenges transferring this design from its Finnish origins to an American builder. Could you address that?
Yeah, we have successfully solved all the issues. For instance, the biggest one was converting a metric set of 300 drawings into imperial, and that got done. And then fitting the different parts together, it's an all hydraulic vessel. Even the propeller runs hydraulically. So once that's going, we're within 2 to 3 weeks of finishing our first one. Our client is the state of New York, and it'll be used for ice breaking on the Erie Canal.
Very good. We look forward to your progress, and you are a Propeller Club of Northern California member. Yes. So we are very grateful for your contribution and your support. This is
Stas.
Yes.
There's a question for Peter.
Thank you.
How many of these do you expect to be in operation in the U.S. in 10 years, 50 years?
We're thinking next year we will sell and build 6, and after that, perhaps 12 a year. So we should be up to 100 within 5 to 7 years.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay. Hearing none. Again, Peter, thank you very much. I think you're a pioneer for us in the United States, looking at bringing in new technology for dredging that is very timely, because a lot of the projects that we have talked about today, Texas, Louisiana, and tomorrow, San Francisco, not to mention New York and many other states, the airport at Oakland that Danny Wan mentioned, these are all dredging projects, and there is going to be a lot of dredging, and there aren't a lot of dredgers. So costs are high. Productivity is not what it should be according to the Tulane University study, and you bring forth a new concept, which I wish you the best of luck with.
Thank you very much. We are looking forward to it. Thanks.
Okay. This concludes us for today. We are back tomorrow at 08:45 Pacific. We have another full day, and just to give you the highlights, the Port of Long Beach and San Francisco will welcome. We have a presentation about desalination from Randy Truby of Truby Associates. The Port of New York and New Jersey will be discussing its plans to avoid or address the next Hurricane Sandy. We have a group from the Netherlands. We heard today about Ice Storm and the organization. It's an international organization headquartered in the Netherlands under the direction of the Rijkswaterstaat, which is the Dutch Waterways Agency. Mark Walraven, the senior advisor who's been working with the people in Texas, will be speaking. Port of Rotterdam, Joos de Nooijer, will be speaking about what's been going on at the Port of Rotterdam. We'll be hearing from Royal Haskoning, a Dutch company about flood risk management and coastal designs. After the break, we're going to hear from Derek Chow at the Port of, at the State Harbors Division of Hawaii, Joseph Gellings at the Port of Seattle, and not last but not least, we will be hearing from a California panel that will include Lieutenant Colonel John Cunningham of the Army Corps of Engineers, Brad Benson from the Port of San Francisco, Jan Novak representing the Port of Oakland. The Bay Conservation and Development Commission will be represented by Brenda Gaden, and the South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project, David Halsey. So we look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you all for your presentations and participation, and have a good rest of the day. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow. I want to say one last thing. The Society of American Military Engineers, the people at the ports, the people who are doing design work, our mayors, our people at NOAA are on the front line of a growing challenge that is going to be daunting. And I really wish to thank the people who are here. Your work is what makes us have a future. Thank you all very much, and see you tomorrow.
Thank you.